So, Alessandra, welcome to the podcast. I'm delighted to have you because I always admire On and especially the culture of On. So it's a real honor to have you. Um, my first question is, could you tell perhaps a little bit about your role as head of engagement and talent growth? What are your main responsibilities in that role?
Thank you so much, Dirk, and thank you also for having me in your podcast. It's also an honor for me to share a little bit about On and our journey. And so my role basically have like three main pillars, I will say. So first, growth, which is of course about the opportunities we give to our team members for growth perspective, which interventions we facilitate for them to experience that growth of the company and on in general. Then we have leadership. Of course, leadership is a fundamental of our culture. I feel like if you think about it, the role of leaders is fundamental, and like this is the role that anchors a lot of things for our culture. So that's the second pillar. And the third is around performance and feedback.
Yeah.
So how do we enable individuals? What's our culture on feedback? Yeah, and how do we enable those cycles to happen with frequency and in a powerful way?
Ah, super. And I'm also delighted to hear that you consider, let's say, leadership as one of the key pillars of the success of On, because that is the whole purpose of this podcast. So thank you for that. I mean, I think On and I also got this from the website. It's got a very unique mission, right? It is to ignite the human spirit through movement. And you also have a very specific set of values, which you call, explorer, athlete, team, positive, and survivor. I'm just curious when, how, and by whom were this mission and values, which you call spirits, defined?
Yes. So yeah, the five spirits to explain a little bit like which ones they are and like what do they mean. We have the athlete spirit first. That speaks about humans and the ability of humans to search for bigger goals and contribute and that aspiration that really fuels the human being. And of course, it speaks a lot of course, the parallelism with athletes of wanting to achieve higher
Yeah.
goals and train for these goals and like that consistency that athletes experience. Then the explorer spirit, this speaks a lot about even how On came about, right? Like innovation, the innovative products, the innovative idea, disrupting a little bit the market even and like the preconditions that were there and that ability to really explore and think differently. Then we have the positive spirit, which we also call deliver the wow. That is about the light, how to really impress other human beings and surprise them in a way, in a positive way.
Yeah.
The team spirit, which of course speaks about how humans come together and achieve great things together as a team, and what behaviors are there for each other in that collaboration. And then the survivor, which also speaks about sustainability and the care for our planet longer term. So in terms of like how did they came about, they were really from the beginning of On. Um, it was a leadership reflection in terms of like what are the behaviors that we want our team members to really embrace. And these are the fundamentals to our culture. And if you see a lot of like the behaviors of our team members, our leadership as well, and how they really embody these values and really show each of these components when acting with others. So yeah, I think they have been the same values and spirit since the beginning, and it came more from a leadership reflection around what behaviors will be important for us and our culture to really be successful.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's an amazing story, of course, in terms of, growing a brand in an ultra competitive market from, let's say, Switzerland, which is not, let's say, the first country you think about in terms of, building such a global brand in this industry. It's a fantastic story. My question is, how are these spirits communicated and kept alive in the everyday work of the staff at On? Because positioning them, formulating them is one thing, but how do you bring it to life in the day-to-day life of your employees?
Yeah. So I think, interestingly enough, we are not like if you go to our offices and you visit us
Yeah,
the
yeah,
other
yeah. It's a
day.
pleasure of visiting the office. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we always say that they are not in any wall
yeah.
in our office. Like they're not really displayed, but that doesn't mean they're not live and that when you visit our office as well, you experience because there there are behaviors that you see from people that will show you our values without maybe explicitly saying so. For example, in our office, if you come in, we usually, well, in the office per se, we don't have a receptionist at the
No, no,
beginning,
no. I was looking for one the
right?
last time I was there. I was looking for one, but yeah,
Correct.
no,
Yeah,
no.
it's a coffee barista,
Yeah.
right? And usually if you look a bit lost in the office in terms of like trying to look for a
Yeah,
place,
yeah, that happened to me
somebody
exactly. Yeah,
yeah, somebody will ask you, like,
yeah,
hey, can I help you? Do you need anything? People really have this care for like, okay, you want to have a good experience when you visit our offices, so how can we help you, right? And I think that's a good way to live the positive spirit within our office. We definitely have some rituals to communicate. So, for example, in the onboarding, there is a session that we speak about the spirits. And of course, it's important to set that tone in the onboarding because you're welcoming the new joiners to the company, and it's almost a way for them to understand what are the things that we care for in the way we behave and for our culture. So it is a good way to establish that culture and for them to know how do we behave here at On. And it's interesting because the feedback that we get with new joiners is that a lot of the things they experience during their interview process, for example, like interviewers will be, expressing about their values and they will get to know, of course, as part of that process, our culture. Um, Additionally, we recognize around our like people that really embed our spirits. So as teams usually have spirits awards where we
oh,
nominate other team members to be recognized for the spirits, and usually it's a really engaging moment. And yeah, I think people really have nice memories of recognition with the Spirits Awards. And I think it's a good way to also bring a little bit this idea to like certain behaviors that the team is doing and recognizing them for it. So I think it's also another channel. And of course, we speak a lot about them as part of our town halls and leadership development as well. So they're really present and top of mind for us when we interact.
yeah. I love that ritual part and basically spirits award. That's a great element. Um, my other question is in our pre-discussion, you told me that the on culture was the secret sauce of the company. How do you measure, let's say, the degree to which these values are alive and adhere to?
Yes. So on an annual basis, we have our engagement survey, and we usually have really high participation, so 90% plus participation from our team members, because it's recognized as the channel to really provide feedback on how our culture is doing and how things are working within teams. This engagement survey has different sections, but it measures aspect. For example, innovation is one aspect that we constantly measure in terms of if individuals have the time. and space to really innovate and think differently. Another aspect is team collaboration, how the team spirit is showing up and how people are working together towards common goals. Um, Feedback is another aspect that we also measured in terms of how people are being honest with themselves and building that trust. I think trust is an important aspect that comes to mind as well when I think about our culture. So it's definitely a way for us to have a pulse check on how are we doing within our culture and what are the things that are relevant for the team. I think we're also very disciplined. Maybe other companies do several surveys throughout the year, a lot of pulse checks. We do just once a year. We ask how things are going, and of course, we act upon the feedback and we communicate throughout the year. It's not like, oh, we do it once a year and then we like talk about it the next year. There are different checkpoints throughout the year, but we don't ask again unless we have act on it. So I think the annual cadence really allows for us to think about, okay, how are we addressing the potential gaps and then worked on it and then ask the following year. And then you really complete that cycle in terms of listening to the feedback and then acting upon it. So yeah, I think it's and also like you leadership is super bought in. Like there's also rituals around like, okay, we get the results. There's a deep dive analysis on the sentiment, the regions as well, and there's of course a communication with the team quite transparently about the results and the actions that we will take.
Hmm. And can you and if it's, let's say, confidential, then don't. But can you mention, for instance, an example of, let's say, an outcome of one of these surveys where you and the rest of the leadership had the idea of we need to do something about this?
Yeah, I think definitely. Of course, we're a company that we're in a really hyper growth phase, right? Like
Yeah.
our sales were growing or are growing considerably. So that of course has a dynamic and a speed that is quite fast, and also the way we grow teams, right? Like you're hiring a lot of new people, and there's quite some dynamism happening within different teams and the collaboration within this team. So I will say that the topic that has been, consistently like this last year has been around team collaboration and how's the communication, how clear we are around roles and responsibilities and who's doing what, right? Like with the amount of people we have and new joiners, of course, that creates unclarity in certain moments. So we have been really intentional to work on these aspects to really achieve that excellence and collaboration that is optimal for everyone at On.
Yeah, but that's a super example, Alessandra. Thank you for bringing that to life. Another question I always ask companies about their culture is a lot of companies have these, lofty statements in the sense of, we want to improve the world, and in order to do that, we do X, Y, Z. What I'm always interested in is if culture really lends. So could you perhaps mention an example where you said, well, we took the decision based on our mission, based on our values, and that was the reason why we took the decision. Other companies might have done something different, but we basically want to stick to our, mission and values. Could you perhaps give an example around it?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought of a good example is around well-being and like what company
Yeah.
responsibility around well-being. Like I think um it has been like a very traditional point of view that your personal life is your personal life and it should not be mixed
No,
up
no,
or
no, that was the way I was brought up. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
There's life and there's work, and there's a kind of, almost a Chinese wall in between. Yeah, yeah,
Correct. And like we never know about your personal life and like it never, but of course I think and I think COVID really accelerate a
yeah,
lot of this change in terms of like lines are not really that defined and like work and life is very intertwined. And of course individuals, if they have problems at work, they will bring it home and vice versa,
yeah.
right? And I think as well the role that companies play around well-being is super fundamental, and like there needs to be a support for team members around their well-being, because if you think about it, growth and development, how much time they have to really dedicate to their bodies, and like activities, and also their mind, right? Like how their setup of their jobs makes them thrive, and really have the time and capacity to really prioritize things. And so I do think that there is a big role that companies play, and as part of that, and we have this partnership with Kian, which you're very familiar. And of course, when we were making the decision around, okay, should we support team members around mental well-being, which is also another tricky topic that sometimes we're not comfortable speaking about it or bringing it to the workplace. For us, if you think about the athlete spirit and like also the human spirit that is part of our mission, this of course made us make the decision that yes, we need to support our team members and their well-being, and just be very open about it. Otherwise, we won't be consistent with
Our values
for the
and
human. Exactly.
yeah.
So I think it's a good example in terms of like if you say that you care for your team members and like these human first type of companies, you really need to walk the talk and support team members in all areas, as your responsibility to be consistent with what you're saying, right?
Yeah. But what strikes me, by the way, Alessandra, is that you consequently mention team members. Usually, people on this podcast talk about staff or employees or direct reports, indirect reports. You consequently talk about team members. Is there a specific idea behind it?
Yes, definitely. We refer to our team members as team members and not employees. I think words really have a lot of importance, and I think as well how we consider our team members, and like really that yeah, like acknowledging that it's not just employees in the traditional sense of the word, but team members, and that of course they're part of the team, and I think it has that implication of recognition that we're not just an employer and an employee, but it's
Yeah.
a richer relationship, and also going away from that. Sometimes people have a very transactional view about work, right? Like, oh, I come, I get paid, and like I'm
Yeah.
out, right? And I want to think that on provides a space for people to achieve other things, contribute to a greater good, and identify with their own why, which has, of course, deeper meaning and more lifetime positive impact than just a paycheck, or,
Yeah.
the transactional view of work that's maybe other companies have a bit more.
Yeah. It's a beautiful inclusive term, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
But what I'm also curious about is how are these values actually embedded in HR processes? And I'm very curious into three processes. So let's take them one by one. So, for instance, in recruitment, how do these values come back in recruitment?
hmm Yeah, recruitment is a very interesting and very key process for us, especially, of course, as we've been growing considerably, is that entry door to our culture, right? So we play a lot of importance from a candidate experience, and how, we show up to candidates as they go through the process. So to put an example, if you are in like you made it to the hiring manager stage and you had an interview, you spend time, with us preparing for that, and let's say there is a negative feedback about your application, you will receive a call from our recruiters with feedback, for example. So some companies may ghost people and like not call them back ever again, and you never know about where's your application. We put a lot of care in individuals hearing back from us and really provide that feedback in terms of their application and the reasons why it didn't work. We also keep our pipelines. We have a lot of visualization of our pipelines and like consider candidates for other roles. Like the recruiting team is playing a very active role in ensuring that we match
Yeah.
great individuals to the roles that we have. So I do think that we put a lot of care into
Yeah.
applications and
Yeah.
getting back to individuals.
Yeah, it comes across a little bit like you treat applicants the way you're also treating your customers in the sense of you want to, provide them really with a good experience.
That's right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. The other thing you said you were responsible for is also performance management. So how do I see, let's say, the mission and the spirits coming back in the performance reviews?
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. We have established specific rituals for these reviews to happen. So, and honestly, we have tried different methodologies. Like there was a year that we like removed them completely, but then this year we brought them back because I think it's important to set the expectation. If you don't have a formal process, then you leave a lot of room to interpretation in terms of like, is this supposed to happen or not? We are not very specific about it, the how, right? In terms of like, we leave a lot of openness in terms of like, what's the conversation? Of course, guiding leaders a lot about what is important and for them to be equipped for those conversations. But also like re-emphasizing the importance of feedback and then for individuals to know that if we want to be an entrepreneur, an innovation company, feedback needs to be part of the equation, and that trust building that feedback brings as well is very important. So we really set the expectations in terms of performance conversations and feedback to be a must that is constantly happening within teams, team members and their leaders. And not only team members and leaders, but also other team members. And connected to the topic of collaboration that we were speaking earlier, I think it's important for people to know that your stakeholders also need to be happy with the way you're showing up and the behaviors you're having, and also provide a channel for individuals to provide feedback to their leaders. I think that's also a great addition. So people know that there is a space for them to also share feedback towards their leaders on things that they need to change.
Yeah, so it's a kind of a two-way conversation. It's not a kind of one-way street, and this is how I observed you last year. And but there's also an opportunity to give feedback back. Does it also play a role in talent management? Mission or the values. Does that also play an active role? And if so, can you tell us something about it?
Yes. Yeah, when we speak about the team spirit, we talk about we're a sports team, not a family. Uh,
Hmm.
and that speaks a lot about we are a sports team and like we're aiming for high performance and like the individuals on the team will also depend on the performance and even if you like we won't be loyal to someone just because they are part of the family, right?
No,
Like
not because they signed their employment contract at a certain moment in time.
exactly like that they
Something more
are.
is required. Yeah.
Yes, that they're here forever. So, yeah, we speak a lot about performance and also acting on low performance. And like we have invested a lot in communicating to our leaders, like the implications of keeping a low performer, right? Because in traditional, like historically or like in general, people think that if you have a low performers, this is a problem between the leader and the low performer, and like, nothing else happens. But reality is when you have a low performer, the full team gets impacted, right? Like they either need to pick up
Yeah.
the things that this person is not dealing with, or this person slows down just the overall dynamic, the pace of the team because they need to wait for this person. Even the level of discussion and conversation, if someone is not really contributing, you notice, and the team notice as well. So it's bringing this idea to leaders in terms of like, the performance of your team is not going to be just the average performance of the team, but how low you are going or allowing the low performer to be,
Yeah.
because it's really contagious, right? And it's important that of course with the right feedback in advance, and that the person is not surprised, and like with a human approach to the separation for sure, but that this happens, and we act really on low performers instead of just
Yeah.
allowing them to just stay within the team. So I think that's an important aspect of the values and how
Yeah.
translate to our performance management.
Yeah. I really loved the phrase that you just used in the sense that On is a sports team. It's not a family. And what I also understood is, those who contribute the most, are the ones to lead. And what I also read somewhere at On, leadership is earned, not given. So I think that is beautifully worded. Um, can you tell me a little bit, and you already started when you discussed performance management, some aspects of it, but what are, let's say, the do's and don'ts of leading at On? So let's say, what are definitely do's in the sense of this is what you're expected to do, and what is the behavior that you have an idea of, that's not tolerated here. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yes. So in terms of leadership, I will say we really put emphasis on three areas, I will say, that are super important. One is trust. So leaders to nurture trust within their teams, that there is a safe space to speak up, and like in general, there is this feeling that people can take risk, right? And bring half-baked ideas. It's really important from an innovation standpoint, and just overall relationships between humans. So that's one component. The second component is of course that ability to solve problems, and like the entrepreneurship and the ability to really drive results with the team. I think that's the second component that is really important. And then the third is the coaching aspect.
Hmm.
So the ability for leaders to bring their teams forward, and really invite them to come up with their own answers, and really incentivize that growth from a team perspective. Um, so these are almost like the fundamentals aspects. In terms of like do's and don'ts, I think from a don'ts perspective, we really um, not value people that are self-centered,
Hmm.
or that have their motivations are not considering the others. So I think that's a behavior that if you notice somebody doing it really doesn't go with our culture, or doesn't go well with others. And I think especially for leadership, you really need to have this servant relationship in a way, and definitely not think about yourself first. And if somebody has those behaviors, I think overall they're not going to, this doesn't translate in great leadership. So we are really specific about leaders not being self-centered, and acting,
On
on them.
behalf of the team.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alessandra. I really learned a lot, and I think the listeners to the podcast will definitely have learned a lot as well. So thank you so much for investing your time, and thank you so much for sharing the great story of the culture at On with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here.